Hello everyone, welcome to my Bible series on extraordinary, ordinary people of the Bible. Today is my second video segment on Moses, an extraordinary, ordinary man. Go ahead and click the like and subscribe button if you like what I am saying regarding this video series. Most of the life, so let's begin where we left off. We were talking about Exodus, okay, which is the second book of the Bible. It is part of the Pentateuch, or the Torah, which are the first five books of the Bible. And most of Exodus is devoted to the life of Moses, okay? So where I left off is, you got to understand that the life of Moses is really divided into three 40-year segments. The first 40-year segment has to do with Moses in Egypt, from a young child until the time he is exiled into the desert. Okay, this is the time when Moses really thought he was somebody. Okay, he was everything. I'm the prince of Egypt. I'm everything. I'm somebody. I am going to save the nation of Israel. I'm going to be the one. Okay, without anybody's help, I'm going to be the one. The second segment of 40-year segment has to do with Moses in the desert, when he learns that he is a nobody. Took him 40 years to learn that. He's a nobody, okay? And then the third 40-year segment of Moses' life is when Moses is in the wilderness with the nation of Israel, and when he learned what God can do with a nobody to become the great leader that he became. When Moses first entered the world as a baby, it was a dark, dark time for the nation of Israel. At that time, Joseph had passed away, and the new Pharaoh came to the throne. He didn't know anything about Joseph. He didn't know anything about the agreements between the nation of Israel in Goshen and the Egyptians. Didn't know anything about that, and did not honor those agreements. He looked upon the nation of Israel, he and his advisors, his nobility, his military, his priesthood, they looked upon the nation of Israel as with a lot of suspicion. Okay, they were very insecure. They were very fearful that the inhabitants within Egypt, the Hebrew inhabitants within Egypt could, because their population has grown so much, could join the enemies of Egypt and overthrow Egypt. So they were very paranoid about the nation of Israel. Okay. The new Pharaoh despised the growing population of Israel, and in time he and his Egyptian nation enslaved the people of Israel, in which they were put upon the task of building storage cities such as Pithom and Ramses. It came about, the more harsh and brutal they were to the nation of Israel, the more they prospered. What about that? Okay, and that got them to be even more suspicious and hateful toward the nation of Israel. So it came about that Pharaoh wanted to do something about this growing population that they could not control, because of all the brutality that was offered toward the nation of Israel, they just simply prospered. So what are we going to do? And so he summoned the lead midwives to his throne room, okay? And their names were Shiphrah and Puah. And so you got to remember that they were not the only midwives that served the Hebrew women in childbirth, but they were the lead midwives that served the Hebrew women in the nation of Israel, okay? And he told them, he said, look, this is what I want you to do. When these children are born, when these Hebrew children are born, if it's a male child, I want you to kill this child, probably choking the child. And then you will inform the Hebrew woman who gave birth to these male children that, oh, I'm sorry that your child is stillborn. We're so sorry. So he dismissed the midwives, and told them, okay, go away, do what I want you to do. And so they refused. You know, they steadfast with their faith. They held fast to their faith, and they listened, they followed the Lord rather than Pharaoh. They feared the Lord more than they feared Pharaoh. And so they steadfastly held on to their faith. Consequently, the Lord himself, Jehovah himself, he rewarded these midwives and established families of their own, okay? The Bible doesn't specifically say exactly how he enhanced their families, but he did say they were rewarded, okay? And they were protected by the Lord. So it came about through time, it came about that they found that the birth rate was still the same. And Pharaoh was thinking, okay, what's going on here? The birth rates, I gave these women instruction to give the other midwives to kill off these males. What's going on with this population explosion? We have the same birth rate as before. So he called them back into his throne room, and he says to them, okay, he asked them, okay, so what's going on here? Why are these children still being born, and so forth and so? Why are males still being born? And so Shiphrah and Puah informed Pharaoh, look, when we get down to the place where these women are birthing their children, by the time we get there, and by the time my sisters get there and to help them deliver these children, these Hebrew women are quite active and lively, meaning by the time they get there, those children are already born. Okay? So what could Pharaoh do? He couldn't argue that point. So he gave a decree this time. Okay? He didn't simply give a suggestion like he gave the midwives. Now he offered a decree. What you have to understand is that Pharaoh, in ancient times, the Egyptian people considered Pharaoh like a god. Yes, he had considerations with his ruling nobility class, and he had considerations with the military and the priesthood. But once he gave a decree, that decree was law. And what was that decree? To drown all the newborn male Hebrew children in the Nile. Okay? And so this is the time in which Moses was born, in this dark time. It came about that his parents, Amram and Jochebed, his mother, Jochebed, they got married. They were Levites. They got married, and they had 3 children. Miriam was the oldest child. Then you had Aaron, who was 3 years older than Moses, and then you had Moses. So during the time of the birth of Moses, that decree was issued. And so imagine trying to keep the baby Moses quiet, because you didn't know if any of the soldiers or any of the Egyptians that happened to be in the settlement in Goshen can hear these babies crying. You never know if a soldier said, is that male or female? Let me go check out and see if that's a male child. So for 90 days, for 90 nerve-wracking days, 3 months, Jochebed kept her son. And finally, there was a fateful day in which Jochebed made a decision. Well, she already made a decision long before she placed the child in the basket and among the reeds on the Nile River, along the Nile River. She already made that decision. What she probably did is practice. She observed Bithiah, the daughter of Pharaoh. She observed Bithiah going to bathe each day. Miriam observed, and they probably practiced over and over and over what they're going to say, where they're going to position themselves, how you're going to position the little basket in the water along the reeds in the Nile River. It was already probably practiced. So that fateful day came in which Jochebed, she placed the basket along the reeds, among the reeds in the Nile River, and Miriam and Jochebed waited. And one day, later, that fateful day, sure enough, Bithiah, the daughter of Pharaoh, came for her routine bathing. She bathed every day in the Nile River. In this section of now you got to remember, you had to deal with the crocodiles along the Nile River. Crocodiles, by the way, are much more aggressive than the American alligators. They actually will go out and hunt a human. They will hunt you down if you're in their vicinity or their territory. Gators are not quite as aggressive as crocodiles, especially Nile crocodiles. In Africa, you have to be extremely careful with those critters, because they have no fear of humans and they will come after you. And so this is one of the things that you have to take into consideration when you are venturing along the Nile. So her handmaidens, her Egyptian handmaidens, they always walked along the banks of the Nile, both banks of the Nile, as she was about to enter the Nile to bathe. In this section of the Nile, you had some marsh plants along the river. These are called bulrushes, and they were called bulrushes, okay? And these plants, the crocodiles, they didn't like this area so much because it could cut their skin, the bulrush, and they were thick in this area. So the crocodiles normally did not venture in this area where Bithiah was bathing. And so, so she bathed along the papyrus plants and the bulrush plants, and suddenly during that time she actually sighted the basket, or either she heard the baby crying, the baby Moses crying in the basket. And so she sent one of her handmaidens to go and retrieve it. So one of her handmaidens went and retrieved the basket. And once she retrieved the basket and they opened the basket, they found a beautiful baby crying. And which is most likely divine intervention. Bithiah probably instantly fell in love and felt pity for this baby. And so she inquired among her handmaidens, okay, who can nurse this child? Is there anyone that you know, or is there any one of you can nurse this child? And no one could be found. Then Miriam spoke. She arrived and she spoke up and she said to the princess Bithiah, I know someone who can nurse your baby for you. And so Bithiah said, okay, go get her. Okay, if you know her, go get her. I need to speak to her. And so immediately Jochebed arrived, and answered the call of Bithiah, the daughter of Pharaoh. Now you got to remember that these women rehearsed all this. Jochebed could not have been viewed as overexcited, and Miriam could not have overstated her lines. Everything has to be on cue so not to arouse suspicion. Because you got to remember, those handmaidens, they defended their princess, and they were looking on too. They were an audience to all this, okay? And so you got to fool the handmaidens who can influence Bithiah, and you gotta fool the princess herself in this, okay? So they had it all rehearsed, I'm sure. And so it came to a point where Jochebed arrived, and she said, Bithiah told Jochebed, okay, if you nurse this child, I will pay you. Imagine that. You know this was divine intervention, okay? The faithfulness that Jochebed had in actually placing her defenseless child along the Nile River, hoping and praying that Bithiah will come out and actually see her child and take pity on her child. All that imagine the amount of faith that it took for her to do that. Okay? And so you have to know this was divine intervention. And the fact that Bithiah instantly felt pity upon the baby Moses as he was crying. It was Bithiah who named Moses, meaning to draw out. Okay? No one knows the name of Moses before this. No one knows what Jochebed actually named her child before Bithiah issued the name of Moses or Moshe on this child. Okay? And so the name of Moses also is said to be divine intervention. More on that later. Okay? It was a Hebrew derivation. Okay? It wasn't an Egyptian name, it was a Hebrew name. And it means to draw out. Okay? Divine intervention. Okay? And so, we have the birth of Moses, the time of Moses. And now, in my next segment, we will discover how and why Moses was found himself to be exiled from the nation of Israel, from the nation of Egypt, excuse me. So, before I go, imagine that Jochebed, her feelings, that it was bittersweet. This whole experience was bittersweet. Oh yes, her child was saved. Oh yes, she was receiving wages for her child, for raising her child. But think about this. You're raising your child, and you know and you realize at some point that you're going to have to give up your baby, never knowing that you will ever see your child again. And the period of weaning is like 3 to 4 years. So you only have 3 to 4 years to spend with your child. And I can imagine Jochebed every day installing the belief system of the Hebrews and the Hebrew God into this child to form a basis of a belief system into this child. Okay? I can imagine when this child was actually Jochebed and the child were actually summoned to the palace to now live among the royalty in Egypt, I can imagine the anguish of Jochebed, and as a father, and I can imagine the anguish and the loneliness of little baby Moses that he had for his mother. Those lonely nights of being alone. A lot of people, you can be around people, but you can also be alone. Okay? Imagine his anguish not being with his mother. Okay? You will also note that Amram, the father of baby Moses, is never hardly mentioned in the Bible. Okay? It's mainly about the important women in the Bible at this time, like Bithiah and Shiphrah and Puah and Jochebed. Amram is hardly ever mentioned. I just want to give you that note. So, ladies, your value and importance as women is duly noted in the Bible. Okay? So, we will return with our next segment of Moses as he was exiled into the desert and the lessons that he learned in the desert. In our next segment number 3, on Moses, an extraordinary, ordinary man. And as this time, I would like to say to you, thank you for your time. This time, until next time, we'll be seeing you.